Welcome back in to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where, like Terry Bradshaw, we tried to text Andy Reid, but instead got a hold of a guy trying to sell some pigs. I'm Brendon Kleen, staff writer at Awful Announcing. That's Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing. It's Monday, October 27th. Another football weekend has come and gone. We are live, like we are every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Hit subscribe if you're on YouTube finding us for the first time. Hit follow if you are finding us on your favorite podcast platform. Churning out content from the sports media world constantly for each and every one of you. Ben, let's dive in. We've got the fallout from the FBI investigation and arrests last week in the NBA world, plus a stock watch on my backyard, the Big 12. We'll also close out with hot mics, as we always do. But to recap, you guys talked about it last week, you and Drew Lerner on the play-by-play, but Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, both arrested by the FBI as part of an investigation into a fixed gambling, poker ring, I should say, alleged, and a alleged ring related to prop bets and fixing and illegally betting. Each of those two guys were part of each of those two sides of this. And the fallout, Ben, in the NFL world is, of course, not direct. Nobody involved with the NFL was arrested, and what we're about to talk about, of course, is not under scrutiny by the FBI, but it was such an immediate back-to-back incident that I think it highlights what the consequences and the stakes are and why, the federal government, these leagues, are being so aggressive. And that was that Lamar Jackson, who is, of course, been out for about a month, if not more, Baltimore Ravens quarterback, had his practice and injury designation changed late last week and, of course, did not return from the injury as expected on Sunday, though Baltimore did win their game. The Ravens very quickly switched up back from full participant to limited, and we're waiting to see how the NFL acts. They said that it was just basically an accident. He practiced with the practice squad, and he was out there, but they accidentally made a mistake, whatever. What were your thoughts on the snafu that happened, the reaction to it from the league and the Ravens, and kind of, Ben, how it fits into this broader conversation that the FBI has kind of brought to the fore around these little intricacies and how they can blow up into something much bigger?
Yeah, I would have been very interested to see how this would have been covered if it had not come literally 48 hours right after all of the NBA drama and the Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier and Damon Jones arrests, because to me, my instinct was it was an honest mistake. It's easy to see how a team as on top of their P's and Q's as these teams are supposed to be, it is easy to see how a team could mislabel a player's participation if he did participate, but it didn't qualify technically for the full. I wasn't even aware. I follow this stuff pretty closely. I wasn't aware that a team had to list a player as limited, even if he technically participated fully, but just didn't do so with the first team. So, we go through. We have practice reports for every team 3 times a week for every week of the season. It's surprising that this is the first time this has happened and blown up in this kind of way. But I also don't know if maybe it did happen before and it just didn't get the same scrutiny that this did, whether it was because of the player involved or the timing. I just find there are so many more other situations with players and injuries. It's hard to imagine that the one time this would happen was the Ravens with Lamar Jackson against the Bears, just a relatively obscure game for the Ravens to be trying to pull a fast one on the relatively lowly Chicago Bears. So I tend to think it was an honest mistake, but yeah, obviously these practice reports exist in large part because of the gambling impact that they have and the way they can swing lines, and especially when it does come to the involvement of players like Lamar Jackson. So that's where everybody kind of jumped was, hey, this could be a gambling controversy for the NFL if you have teams lying about what's going on the injury report, and it could leave themselves susceptible to that sort of criticism. So I don't think we're there just yet, but I would have been really interested to see how this would have been covered had it not come a direct 48 hours after everything that went down with the NBA this past week.
It probably would have been covered differently. I mean, you had Mike Florio going live on Sunday Night Football and basically, I mean, I won't say demanding, but saying the league should act aggressively here to negate the perception of a conflict of interest or anything. And I do think there's something to be said for, even though the time and place is part of the story here, the time and place can be part of the response, right? Like, I think that they're being more careful when there's more scrutiny is part of how businesses operate. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I guess we can get into the coverage. I do want to get into the coverage, and I guess like how the leagues, all of them are handling this stuff now. But Florio, speaking of him, he had a piece on this situation that I thought was interesting, where I think it explains the severity a lot better than I had it in my head, right? So one, you mentioned it, right? The injury report was literally invented as a way to fight illegal gambling. I didn't know that. I had never heard that, and Florio had that detail, 1947. So like this is the whole point of this stuff, right? And I agree with you. Like, I think the idea, like, were they lying or not? I don't think so. I mean, it would be very banal for this to be the whole setup, right? Like we saw with the Rozier thing, these people go to much more extreme lengths than like a misappropriated injury designation. But the reason that this stuff matters is because, let's say, right, like Florio put it hypothetically in his piece, right, that like the whole point was just to have the Bears think that Tyler Huntley was or wasn't going to start, or hey, let's prepare for Lamar, but then it ends up not being Lamar, whatever. Like those types of games, which we all know that teams play with one another, right? That's why coaches won't often comment about this stuff and everything else. It's really about the other team being aware of it. Well, that's fine, and that can be the reason for it. But then there's how many people in the Ravens building that know about what that is going to be and can act in the small window of time, you know, before the line changes too much, or even before the line changes at all, before the news has been announced. And we see, I actually think the better one-to-one when you look at the NBA arrests last week is Damon Jones, who was a lesser kind of part of it because he's not as flashy of a name and, you know, wasn't directly altering outcomes the way that Rozier allegedly was or anything. But his role in that whole investigation was that he supposedly was handing information around about LeBron James, about whoever. That's where I think, like, it just is such a good example of the potential repercussions of any knowledge. You know, we see it with insider trading on Wall Street and whatnot, right? Like, the microscopic little edges that you can get and how quickly that can snowball. And I don't know, like, it feels like a whack-a-mole that you can never catch up with. I don't know how anybody is supposed to not how those types of potential things are ever going to be rooted out. Like I maybe you're right that we're just more aware of it when moments like this come about, but are we just going to have to live with the reality that stuff's just going to be happening and the game is going to be potentially even more set up for you to fail as time goes on? Like, I guess I don't know where this ends.
I think for everything I've consumed about all of this, the last, couple days, handful of days, I think the best take I heard was from Bill Simmons. And it was just, we're going to have an adjustment period here. We went from sports betting only being legal in Las Vegas to, most states now having the ability for everybody to do it on their phone. And so it's like, we're going to have this adjustment period where you have Cleveland Guardians pitchers allegedly throwing pitches just to game the system on micro bets, allegedly. And that's something that I'm sure they thought they could get away with, allegedly. And they didn't. And so, like you have this same with whatever was going on with Terry Rozier, whatever was going on with Damon Jones. Like, I think there was this idea like that you could get away with certain things and that it would not be easy to catch. And as it turns out, like a flurry of activity on Terry Rozier's unders is going to raise some red flags for FanDuel or DraftKings. So I think we are in this time period because the thing, this is what I always come back to, is we have this push and pull right now of it's more accessible, but it's also easier to catch. So are we just catching things that were previously going unflagged, or is the accessibility leading to this influx of controversies and situations that we didn't previously have? And I think you could argue both, and the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But I do think for the time being, we are going to have this adjustment period when it comes to both teams and players and the people around them learning what's like totally unacceptable as opposed to what was going on just 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, so let's play out that hypothetical or that version of events, right? So that seems to me that it would just mean that this type of thing, what we just saw last week with the FBI and these high-profile NBA figures, is just going to be a regular occurrence. It's just going to happen. Or I guess you're saying that like the people involved are going to learn their lesson. I mean, I would hope so, and I would hope that there can maybe be these cautionary tales the same way that on a much lower level, Calvin Ridley was, for instance. But I can see a world where that happens, but I don't really see a world where bad actors like the, supposed mafia families that were involved here are going to stop seeing this basically legal, this questionable market that has now become legal will be a place that they see that they can go to manipulate the people involved to make a buck for themselves. And I also don't see what I think is a large part of the problem here too, which is athletes and sports figures, the mo money, mo problems type of idea, right? Like these people who have money tend to become in dire straits a lot more easily than others. And the way they have to win back to get even, it gets more, the stakes are higher for them. And I don't see that changing, because you also see people like Gilbert Arenas or the Morris brothers or people like that who have been, roped into questionable legal circumstances and alleged crimes, kind of one step removed from illegal betting, but still related to, fraud and gambling and high stakes money changing hands. That stuff is where I think we always have seen it. You're right. And I do just feel like it's not so much the legalization of betting that I think changed anything, because I agree that did make it harder to find. It's the fact that it's so readily available now, that it's everywhere, that prop bets are a thing you can manipulate now. Like, good luck finding a bookie to go along with all the shenanigans that were involved in what we saw just come down last week. That wouldn't have even been possible. Now it's possible. And so I think it just gives you an opening to take advantage and manipulate all the people across the sports realm. And that's why I wonder, like, if this just becomes normalized, we're just going to have arrests every year. And that's ugly. That makes sports a lot less fun and an appealing of a thing to watch and enjoy than it used to be.
Yeah, and that's something Simmons hit on too, is maybe player props do go away. I mean, here in Ohio, we had college player props initially. In college, we outlawed college player props. In wake of the Guardian scandal, our governor, Mike DeWine, is pushing to get rid of player props in general. Now, I think he has kind of reneged on that a little bit, and it's more about the micro bets, which is what's the next pitch going to be? What's the next play going to be? And that's, as somebody who gambles fairly regularly, I think that stuff is insane. Even like, I can't believe that those markets are readily available. I've come around like on the idea of like either player props go away, either the ability to bet unders on player props goes away, either you just limit it to a handful of high profile players as opposed to being able to bet on Jonte Porter's like over unders for a guy who's going to play in 8 minutes a game. So maybe that happens, but I do think that's also a part of the feeling out period. Is it's not just about educating the players. It's about the states and probably ultimately the sports books deciding like, hey, what is sustainable for us here when it comes to the product we're offering? Because I do think you get to this point where if not only fans, but if bettors feel like the game is rigged, that then you come to an issue with what you're offering.
Well, newsflash to the bettors: props are basically rigged. Don't bet them; it's a bad idea. The book is gonna make way more money on those from you than they did on just game and the old-fashioned types of bets that we had. I mean, that you could make a case that it's in the public interest for those to not exist, just to keep people's pocketbooks healthy, because there's a reason that live game betting and parlays are the thing that the sports books push the most now. It's because they get your money the best and the most easily from them. So I think that would be a easy fix that I would be behind, as long as you can avoid the many tens of millions of dollars that is spent by those companies lobbying for them to continue to exist. But that is a conversation for a different day. Let's pivot to a stock watch, Ben. Perfect use of our go-to segment here. The Big 12. Weird, random debate to pop up over the college football weekend, but it wasn't a great weekend of games, I guess. So Adam Lefkoe got the ball rolling on this. Former TNT NBA Tuesday host, now anchoring the Big 12 coverage that TNT has invested in. He sort of teased that the rest of the college football media ecosystem overlooked the conference and didn't really give it the time of day. I don't think ESPN was responding directly to that comment when they scheduled where College Game Day would be headed next weekend, but they might as well have been, because they are headed to Salt Lake City for Cincinnati, Utah, and going right into the heart of the biggest Big 12 game of the season, you could say, or certainly one of them. But I think it's a good conversation overall, and it kind of goes to what Ben Koo had talked about with us on the show a couple of weeks back, Ben, and I think it's a worthy thing to discuss, because the Big 12 is sort of hidden away a lot of weekends. Their media rights are spread out a bunch. They don't really have the powerhouse programs, obviously, since Texas left and some of the rivalries that were in there have departed. It's a mishmash of schools. You got Arizona, you've got Cincinnati, you've got it's spread across the country, and yet 5 teams in the top 25, and a lot of good teams. Arizona State made a competitive run in last year's college football playoff, and there's some good programs there and some teams that have done a lot of winning. So, which side of this do you lean on? Do you think it's something that in another world could be more of a focus, or do you feel like it's just going to be third fiddle, fourth fiddle most weeks? Where do you fall?
Yeah, I think it's I don't really get the idea that there's anything nefarious going on. I think it's what nobody expected this. So it's I know there were some in retrospect, Cincinnati, Texas Tech back in September was a big game. Nobody was looking at that as a big game back in September. I think it's a really strange conference from an identity standpoint. It's the leftovers from the Big 12, the leftovers from the Pac-12. It's so looking at standings here, you have BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and Texas Tech. Those have kind of emerged as the 4 cornerstone programs, at least as far as this season and the playoff race. BYU still plays 2 of those teams. So you still have high profile games coming down the pike here. None of them are national programs. I mean, College Game Day almost went to the Holy War a couple of weeks ago. I know they ultimately didn't, so you can't give them credit for that. But my other thing is I just have a hard time criticizing College Game Day when they're at least still willing to go to Big 10 and Big 12 games, as opposed to Big Noon Kickoff, which will only go to Big 12 and Big 10 games. And so I don't know. To me, this is a matter of circumstances, and I mean, it just kind of popped up here as a story, and I think maybe a part of that was that it was a lackluster college football slate this past weekend. You're the Big 12 guy here. What do you think?
Yeah, Lefko's comments were clearly tinged with, some homerism. He's literally trying to talk up his own show. It's not really a secret of what was happening there, but it was just funny to have it paired up so directly with game day proving him wrong. And I think Big Noon went to one Big 12 game this year, right, as well. The Barstool Show has gone to Iowa, and I think that they went to another. So, look, there are some games with, Iowa State still being in here. Like, the remnants of rivalry games get scooped up into this conference at times. But I would say that the identity here, especially since Colorado has fallen off, with Shedeur and Hunter gone, it's kind of like the NIL conference. And I think that makes it hard to plan. Like you said, there's not a national program. There's not one in the whole conference, right? Like there isn't one. I mean, Oklahoma State maybe in a bygone era was closer to that than anything, but they suck now and they're falling apart. So it's like, BYU can pop up. Texas Tech is clearly an NIL dumping ground. TCU, Baylor, like those Texas schools get in there. And I think that's just going to make it where Utah, even, season to season, it's going to be hard to tell who is going to be good, and somebody has to win the conference, right? And I think that's part of what it is. Like, these games are blips that you'll get a good game, but you don't necessarily know it ahead of time. The storylines aren't there. I don't really think many people could name a star player from one of these teams. And so just from a national standpoint, it's just not really there, even if they are good and they are competitive. Heather Dinich has just one team making the college football playoff from this conference, and that's the winner of the conference who has to make it in, right? Like, they're not going to get two because they beat up on each other and there's not really one dominant team. So I get it, but I do still think, like Drew and I talked about with Ben Koo a few weeks back when we were talking about, the SEC's kind of TV supremacy this season and what goes into it and how it could change. Like, if the broadcast rights of the Big 12 were consolidated in one place, I do think that would help. I think, the Big 10 can kind of survive being broken up into a few different places because it's the Big 10, but the Big 12, it's like, I live it every weekend. I mean, it was a non-conference game against Northern Arizona, but ASU had a game on ESPN Plus this year. It's on TNT. It's on Fox. It's wherever. It's kind of hard to keep track, and it is hard to follow the league and care about the league, let alone your local program that you are having a rooting interest in. So, if they could go one to one network first and foremost, and that could be part of the identity, and there could be more content like Lefko's little jab, that always helps. But for now, I think we're kind of just waiting for, can Texas Tech put together, 5 straight seasons of this money making a difference? Or can, Arizona State, can Dillingham actually build some kind of, national thing? I don't know. Obviously, I'm getting ahead of myself on that one because I care. But that's where I think this is headed.
Yeah, I remember last year, the Big 12 title game, and it was your Sun Devils against Iowa State, and it's like, here's Cam Scatteraboo, and it's like, here's like this revelation of this running back I had not really heard about the entire college football season, and now all of a sudden he's, I know he just got injured yesterday, now he's the star of the New York Giants. So it's like, there is something there, especially in the era of NIL. I know Arizona State has a NFL caliber quarterback in Sam Levitt. And also I thought it was interesting, when Portnoy came aboard Fox for Big Noon Kickoff, like, all the Big 10 people other than the Michigan people obviously were very apprehensive, especially at Ohio State, obviously, but none of the Big 10 people seemed to embrace him. The Big 12 got their ADs on a call with Dave Portnoy, and we're like, hey, let's do some Barstool branded stuff. Like, whatever you want to do at our campuses is up to you. So it's like, oh, maybe there's something there. Maybe they become the kind of wacky West Coast Barstool conference, but like Midwest West Coast Barstool conference. I don't know, but
how do you even describe the geography? I think that's part of the issue we're highlighting here.
Yeah, plus Cincinnati, Ohio. So I don't know, but it's kind of an odd conference in general, but they still are one of the Power Fours. So that carries some sort of weight.
They will always have at least one spot in the playoff, and that keeps them relevant, of course, for the games to matter nationally in its own way. Let's get to the hot mics of the weekend, something that caught our attention this past weekend, something we liked, we disliked, maybe we just want to shout out. Ben, kick us off here.
Yeah, staying on our college football theme, obviously, if you are following this college football season, you've noticed that programs are just firing their coaches left and right. And it's not just programs, it's high-profile programs. It's not even November 1st yet, and Florida's open, LSU's open, Penn State's open. Like, those are three. I think the best jobs in college football, for my money, are Ohio State, Texas, and LSU. And then I think Florida and Penn State are like in the top 10 somewhere, in the top 15. Like, these are high-profile jobs that are coming open. I think it's going to be fun for the sport. I think this offseason could be a lot like NBA free agency, where you just have coaches moving around and a lot of chaos in that sense. So I enjoy that aspect of it. And then two, I'm wondering if this is the new normal or if this is just like a outlier where you did have, Florida and LSU were obviously already kind of more so Florida. I mean, Florida entered the season with Billy Napier on the hot seat. Penn State and LSU were more surprising, but I also think those are two coaches who are seemingly difficult personalities behind the scenes, and also coaches who haven't just lived up to their expectations in terms of big games. So it wasn't wholly surprising that they fired them. But I'm interested to see, like, in this era of NIL where you have boosters shelling out millions to pay for players. And I saw this last year with Ohio State. They put together a $20 million roster and then lose to Michigan. And Ryan Day gets all this sort of pressure. You wonder if, like, these boosters, when their money doesn't amount to a national title, when they go all in, if it's going to lead to a quicker trigger when it comes to being willing to pay that buyout or whatever it takes to get a new head coach in there. So I'm interested to see if this is an outlier or if this is the new normal, and we're going to basically have NBA free agency, but for college football head coaches at major programs every offseason.
Clearly the influence of boosters is at an all-time high, and so I think your thesis, your theory there is valid, even though obviously with coaching, those people were always the ones who were allowed to spend and have sway. But I think there's just more pressure in general when there's so much more investment happening and involvement and pressure, like the breathing over the shoulder is also at an all-time high. It's also saved, in my opinion, that this season, in a way, from a news and national storyline standpoint, because, like, Diego Pavia being like the player that people care about. I mean, like, what's the on field? I know we're still only halfway through, but I guess if Alabama could really, if they're in the mix to win the whole thing, which right now they look like they are, that would go a long way. But otherwise, it's kind of an odd season where some of the quarterbacks didn't really break out the way we had hoped, and Arch faded quickly. And, so from my standpoint, it's nice that these coaches are getting fired and on the hot seat and moving around, because otherwise it'd be kind of a stinker of a season from a just interest and intrigue standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I follow Ohio State, and I don't think they're going to play an interesting game between Texas in week 1 and Michigan in the final week of the regular season. And they might be the best team in the country. And so it's like, what do you do from August 30th to November 30th? Like, it's a really weird sport to follow if you follow a good team.
My hot mic, the NBA on Prime's debut last Friday night. We will obviously try to carve out some time to talk about this, but it's a little awkward. It made me realize, actually, Ben, how awkward it might be for them just to stake their claim to being part of the national NBA conversation, being hidden away on Friday nights. I know it'll open up a little as the season goes on, and then once we get to the postseason, they'll have a lot of games and whatnot, but kind of an awkward time for them right now. But I thought all of the stuff that was supposed to shine did. I think the studio, the picture quality, the Amazon of it all, worked for me. How could it not? The tech, the LED floor that they were doing that went viral to break down plays and stand in for players and, really model it out. Much better than like when the NFL on Fox guys just stand on some grass for one segment and pretend to play football. Like this was actually really doing it. I liked it. The guys got to realize they're still on TV would be my only tip from day one, where, they talked a big game about not being bombastic, not going the hot take route, not being critical just for the sake of being critical and making fun of guys the way that like Inside the NBA or Stephen A. Smith do. But you're not on a podcast. You are not, just giving a talk at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. Like, bring me some energy. We still are doing a television show. That would be my one note. It was a little quiet, a little timid. And especially Blake Griffin. I was shocked. The dude was like, whispering some obscure point about positional defense and whatnot. I'm like, I love it, Blake, but you're hilarious. You've been on TV. Can we please bring that out of it? So someone, at least one of those guys, is going to have to bring that, because otherwise, they might not like it, but Inside is going to still take the cake 10 times out of 10.
How would you compare it to the NBC studio experience? Because you reviewed that for Awful Announcing, and we're fairly critical of it. I think it follows a lot of the Sunday Night Football and football night in America ethos that's not necessarily surprising.
Yeah, so we're live Monday, and we'll get another shot to see these guys Monday night for the Peacock games and Tuesday night for the NBC doubleheader again. And so I'll withhold judgment a bit because they were on site in Oklahoma City for the ring ceremony and everything else. I think that they did a good job of getting out of the way and allowing that stuff to shine, which is important in its own way, to let the Thunder be a team that people create connection to and memories with and all that sort of stuff. So, I can't hammer them too much. I just think the thing with NBC that's so strange to me is how small the group is and how light on big personalities it seems to be, So I'm leaning Amazon just because I know these people. I like them. I believe that they're going to kind of deliver something for me. Whereas the NBC thing, like you said, with Sunday Night Football, it almost feels like they're just sort of placeholders. They're just getting you from, commercials pregame until kickoff. It kind of felt that way with the NBC NBA side of just sort of, serviceable innings eaters. And I want more from my shows than that. So I hope that they think bigger eventually, and maybe once they're in the studio, they'll get a little more creative with it.
So after 1 week, you'd say NBC probably has the best game presentation, and Inside the NBA is still the standard when it comes to studio.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think so. It's going to be hard for that to budge in any of those directions. Like that kind of feels like where we're going to be at. But that's what's interesting about Amazon is they're the fully new thing. So they have the biggest chance to make their mark if they want to.
Real quick, I haven't seen this discussed. What were your early takeaways on the Mike Breen, Richard Jefferson, Tim Legler booth?
I don't feel like I watched it enough to fully know, but it was kind of as I expected. And I think, similar, I said this with Drew about Reggie Miller last week, where people always underestimate how good of a teammate he is. And you can just see it with him allowing Mike Tirico to get comfortable, him giving space to Jamal Crawford as the third man. And I think Richard Jefferson's humility in that third spot, like he was almost deferring to Legler, even though technically, Jefferson just got bumped up in the postseason last year, but he's the vet, and he's definitely had more experience calling games than Legler has in recent years, and yet it feels like the totem pole is going to be, Legler then Jefferson in that booth. Maybe that'll be the best for it long term, but it kind of surprised me. That was my main takeaway.
Yeah, I thought they had better chemistry than the booth with Burke. I thought there were some moments where Richard and Tim were kind of razzing each other, which you didn't always get when it was Richard and Doris Burke. I will say, though, it's just kind of jarring going from Inside the NBA with Chuck and Shaq and Kenny and this A-list crew to then Richard Jefferson and Tim Legg. Like, it's just a drastic drop in star power. And I'm going to hold on to my Chris Paul ticket for next year is what I'm trying to say.
I like it. I hope we see more integration between the ESPN game talent and inside as time goes on, because I think that really helped TNT feel like it had a personality where you'd see Reggie goofing around or Chris Haynes or whoever, and then it would go to the game and they're kind of commenting, oh, pregame Chuck was. I think that would help the whole thing, but it was day one, of course, like we keep saying with everybody. That'll wrap us up. It is day one for us of the week. We'll be back for you 2 more times, Wednesday and Thursday. So hit subscribe here on YouTube to catch us live when we are here. Follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio to get the episodes in your feed after they are published. Enjoy your Monday. We'll catch you Wednesday.